So we're now looking at how to write and structure your method section of your research project. Obviously, following the scenario, you're on placement and have been required to carry out a piece of research, and obviously we're in the process of writing that bit of research up. And you'll have seen this before. We're looking at how you plan, conduct, produce and review. That's the whole process. And actually the method section relates to planning and conducting. It's essentially, it has two purposes really. One, provide almost a set of instructions of how to do your project. So how, if somebody wanted to, they could replicate your project. And secondly, it gives a sense of how trustworthy has been your methodology, your protocol, the way you've collected your data. If it's a very good protocol and good methodology, then we can consider the results valid. If there are flaws in the method and the way you did the project, then we might question the validity of the results that came about from it. So what we're pretty much looking at is who's involved, what they do, when they did it, where they did it, why you did it in this way, and how you did it. So basically a whole set of questions to be answered and stated in the methodology. And in viewing these questions or answering these questions, we're creating, as I said, this set of instructions for anybody who wish to replicate your project. I think it's best to, and it's commonly done, to subsection the method. So these here would be subtitled sections, and each one addresses a slightly different element of the method. And if these are all completed and thought through, then there's every chance that your project would be replicable, valid and reliable. So we'll go through each one at a time and have a look at those. So subjects first of all. Lots of things we need to consider in terms of subjects. We need to state the sample size, so how many people were involved, and break down the number of males and females to give that as an idea. You need to identify what population they are, so this might be, you know, of a certain age, of a certain race or cultural background, because obviously your sample is supposed to represent a larger population. We would then specifically need some subject characteristics, and this might mean their ages or the means of their ages and the standard deviations, height, weight, whatever details is appropriate really in terms of their anthropometric measures, their physicality. You would state how you recruited your sample, and this is obviously very critical in terms of validity. Within our course we're quite limited, but you should know that a random sample is best in terms of increasing validity. You would state any relevant experience they had that was relevant to your project, and any other relevant details that you felt would be worth including. And I've put here on the right just one sample of a subject section. It doesn't include all of the things I've just talked about, but it gives you a sense of the writing style nonetheless. Here's a way, and perhaps you might want to consider presenting your data also, or some of the data. There's certainly the subject characteristics. You could put it in a table form. And remember that you need to reference the table, table 1, and title it, and acknowledge that in your write-up. The second section we need to look at is materials and equipment. So pretty much how and where your project was done, what was used to do it. You'd state the location and the facility that was used. List all the apparatus or equipment, and in theory you should be so detailed that you give the make and the model of your equipment. Obviously there might be some variations if we were being highly strict and precise in terms of the quality of your equipment or how reliable the equipment was. So you need to list all the equipment used. It's okay to use diagrams, certainly if you're doing a practical activity, to give the orientation of how data was collected or where subjects were or where equipment was. And then finally, if it's appropriate, give any scheduling or the time lapse between your testing and how your data was collected. Thirdly then, research design, so how you initially organised your subjects. You need to state the type of practical. So was it observation? I think in most of our cases it will be an experiment. State the design. So is it repeated measures or independent measures? Are you using the same people or are you using different groups of people? Acknowledge why you used this group and the relevance of it in the context of your project. You need to state the variables, so the independent and the dependent variables, and acknowledge how you're going to measure or score your data. So is it scores, is it VO2 max, is it, what is it? And then finally state the null and the alternate hypothesis, linking it of course to the IV and the DV. Fourthly, procedure. So this is kind of the nuts and bolts of how your protocol, really, how you're going to collect the data. So for each condition, if you do multiple conditions, some with an audience, some without an audience, for example, you need to explicitly write how you went about that, and also any instructions that you gave the subject. In theory, you should give the subjects exactly the same verbal cues or instructions, because any variations in what you say could affect their performance and then undermines the validity of and reliability of the results. So any instructions should be noted down and they should be quoted, and this part actually describes what you did for each condition. You also need to acknowledge any extraneous variables, so variables that may have affected the people taking part, the subjects of your project, and also any situational variables that may have affected the environment that you did your data collection in. These are things in which you have controlled the variables, so you're acknowledging what you did to minimize any other variables affecting your IV and DV. We move on then to ethical and legal considerations. So an earlier assignment in research methods, you obviously learnt all about these two factors, and you need to acknowledge in your method how you're going to take these into consideration. So anticipate any ethical and legal factors that may come about within your data collection and certainly within your project as a whole. You have to state what's in place to acknowledge those ethical and legal factors. So what are you doing about them? How are you containing them or controlling them and making them okay? Any advice or any obligation to abide by guidelines set by BASIS should be acknowledged. Assuming that you have an informed consent and PAR-Q form, these can go as part of it as an appendix, but obviously every subject should have completed these before they took part in your experiment. And obviously you will be creating a risk assessment for your protocol and your data collection, which again can go as an appendix. And then finally, data analysis. So you need to state what data analysis you will apply to the raw data that you collect. Now, you know from, again, research methods assignments, you need to present and analyse the descriptive statistics. So you'll be presenting the mean and the standard deviations. You'll be doing some inferential statistics, and you need to know what test that you're going to use and why that test is most appropriate. Now, we've talked about decision trees. You'll be justifying your use of the test that you do. You also should know that you need to set the level of significance so that when you're comparing your test result to that level of significance, we know if we have as an outcome a significant or a non-significant result. And this text that's below, pause the video, have a read of that. It's, again, something I've taken from another source and is the sort of way you might write to summarise some of this information. It's a guide. So just to recap then, we've looked at various subsections of this methodology section, and ultimately if you can state exactly what was done through all of these sections and how you considered all of these sections, you should ensure more than anything that your research is replicable, valid and reliable.